Hello, good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to you all on behalf of the Way Chambers Sustainability Network, Waste Management and Supply Chain Task Forces. The topic of today's webinar is partnering with waste service providers to provide solutions to waste segregation, collection, transportation, and recycling during COVID-19 pandemic. And I have with me my colleague, Mr. Charles Coe, who is the Program Manager, Center for Responsible Business. He will be moderating today's session along with me. And I would like to also introduce you to our distinguished guest, Mr. S. Madhu Mohan. He is the Chief Innovation Officer, Environmental Solutions with Dulsco. We also have with us Mr. Harbinder. He is the chairman and founder of Yes Full Circle Group of Companies. And we also have Siva Kumar Shanmugaval. He is the Regional Environment, Health and Safety Manager with Nestle. So the main objective of today's webinar, which is jointly organized by Supply Chain and Waste Management Task Force, is to actually look at some of the very practical solutions to the challenges that the companies are facing when it comes to waste segregation, collection, storage, and transportation. And at the same time, we will also look at how the waste right after segregation actually goes through a journey till it is recycled, and what are the various categories of waste that can be recycled, what are the end products that are made out of that waste recycling journey. And at the same time, we will also see what are the best practices when it comes to selecting your waste service provider. What are the do's and what are the don'ts? What are the few things that you should always keep in mind when choosing your waste recycler or a waste management service provider? And also, because we are talking about businesses, we are talking about office waste, so it's very, very important to also engage your employees in waste segregation, as that's a very first step. So we will also hear from Mr. Madhu Mohan as to how you can engage your employees towards waste segregation. So now I would like to invite my colleague, Mr. Charles Coe, to describe the agenda and moderate the panel session. Thank you very much, Charles. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sangeeta, for the introduction. And I'd also like to pass my thanks to also the speakers for joining us today on this session, and also all of the attendees for coming to the session this morning. So many thank you for joining today. I'm just going to do a quick recap of the agenda that we're going through today for today's session. So as Sangeeta mentioned, this is a collaboration between the supply chain and the waste management task forces. So we're going to give you a quick review of the activities that we've been up to with each task force for 2020. This should only last a few minutes because we want to get the speakers up and running so you can really hear what interesting insights and solutions they have for you today. So first of all, we're going to be hearing from Mr. Madhu Mohan from Dulsco, and then we'll be hearing next from Mr. Harbinder, and then we'll also be hearing from Mr. Siva Kumar as well as our third speaker for today. I think what's also really interesting to mention is that we're going to be having a Q&A session at the end of the webinar today. So for those unaware, you can submit your questions using the Q&A button. You should see it on your screen. There'll be a Q&A button. You can just submit your question at any point during the webinar, and then we can pick up those questions and ask them to the speakers at the end of the session as well. So all that we do ask when you do submit your question is if you just tell us who you are directing your question to, and so we can direct it to the right person. Okay then, so today's event is a collaboration between the Supply Chain Task Force and the Waste Management Task Force. Just to give you a recap of the activities that we've been up to in the Supply Chain Task Force. So at the beginning of the year, 3rd of February, we had our launch meeting. And during this meeting, we agreed on our 3 objectives for the year. The first objective was to host a forum session to explore and identify the key opportunities available to businesses to engage with their supply chain partners in increasing operational efficiency. And then we agreed the second objective for the year would be to have another forum session where we share best practices for businesses to engage with supply chain partners in reducing waste, which is why we're here today. And then we also had a third objective for a research project looking into supplier scorecards. So that has been our main focus throughout the year. Now, before we're able to deliver our first objective for the year, unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic hit everyone, hit businesses across the world. So the focus for the first forum that we hosted on the 10th of April was looking into supply chain continuity and worker safety, because this was very much at the start of the pandemic. Suppliers and businesses as a whole were severely impacted in their supply chain. So we took the objective for supply chain efficiencies and operational efficiencies, and we focused on that continuity for this section. So a really successful webinar. We had some good pickup in the press as well for this event, and we found it a very useful event to host. Following the webinar, we had our mid-year review in June, and leading up to that review, we had a quick voting session to just see if the objectives that we set at the start of the year were still, if we wanted to focus on those, or if we wanted to tweak them to make them more relevant for COVID-19. And during the mid-year review, we discussed this, we discussed the results, and we decided to slightly revise the remaining 2 objectives for the year. So the second objective that we agreed to deliver was to share best practices for businesses to engage with supply chain partners in waste during COVID-19. And that is what we're here for today. So we've got the waste management aspect today, and that is why we're collaborating with the waste management supply chain, because we have all of that wealth of knowledge and expertise available. So we've prepared this event for you today. And then the final research project will be still focusing on supplier scorecards, but we're going to be looking at developing a framework that is going to be fit for purpose in the new normal. So the supply chain task force members, you'll be hearing from me after this webinar today, and this will be our final remaining objective for us to deliver before the end of the year. So you will be hearing from me on that one. To give you a quick summary of the Waste Management Task Force, the task force has been very busy. One deliverable this year has been the publication of a toolkit, and that was a step-by-step guide on office solid waste management. It's looking into refuse, reduce, reuse, and recycle. I think this is a very relevant topic to today's webinar. So if anyone hasn't seen it or they still want to get hold of it, please do get in contact with my colleague, Dr. Sangeeta, and she will be able to make this available for you so you can look at the toolkit and take on board those the step-by-step guide. Another publication that the task force delivered this year was our white paper on non-hazardous industrial solid waste management. So this was a private sector perspective. So this was a collaborative publication within the Waste Management Task Force, and this was looking at insights from within the industry into the non-hazardous industrial solid waste management, and gave that private sector perspective. So again, if you want a copy of this, please get in contact with Dr. Sangeeta. She will share a copy with you, and we look forward to sharing those findings with you. I think you'll find it very interesting if this is a relevant topic for you. Now, another deliverable that the task force delivered this year was a webinar on ensuring safe disposal of PPE and COVID-19 related waste. This was hosted on the 25th of June and was attended by 52 participants from 31 companies. I think what we're finding is waste management still is a very, very important and relevant topic, especially more so during COVID-19. So we had some esteemed speakers that came and talked about that topic in June. And another deliverable for the task force this year was the launch of the Let's Reduce and Recycle campaign. And this was launched back in August and will be running for a period of 3 months until October. And again, if you want any more information about this, if you want to get involved, please get in contact with Sangeeta. She is the program manager for the Waste Management Task Force, and she will be able to help you get involved with this campaign. Okay, so you've almost heard everything from me. Just before we get going with the speakers, just want to engage with you as the audience a little bit, and just want to launch a poll and just to get your feedback on one question. So I'm going to launch the poll. Question is, which aspect of waste management is the biggest challenge in your workplace? So hopefully all of the attendees, you can now see the window on your screen. So if you just select which one of these aspects is the biggest challenge for you, it'd be interesting to see those results. So you can pick between segregation, collection, transportation, or recycling. So we've got just about 55% of the votes in. People are still voting. We're seeing there at the moment, there seems to be most votes are going towards segregation. I'll keep the poll open just for a few more seconds, and I'll close it quite shortly, and then we can see the results on those. Okay then, so just close the poll. So very interesting results here. 61% of you voted that waste segregation is the biggest challenge for you in your workplace. And then 29% of you voted that recycling was the biggest challenge for you. And then 11% voted for collection. What's very interesting is that 0% noted that transportation is a challenge for you. I guess this is a sign that companies like Dulsco are doing their job really well. So thank you Dulsco. Okay, it's interesting that the result here, segregation, is the biggest challenge for you as the audience. We've got some interesting insights on that today, so we do hope we can address this for you. I'm going to clear the results for you. I'm now going to introduce you to our first speaker, and that is Mr. Madhu Mohan from Dulsco. So over to you. If you just unmute yourself and you can get underway. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Hope you can all hear me. Interestingly, just now you saw the poll which talked about segregation being the biggest challenge. Well, that is the biggest challenge throughout the region or wherever you go as far as waste is concerned. So I would like to run a small presentation to all of you to see how these challenges exist today and what are the things which we could do. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay, we go ahead. So it's challenges in the region in waste. So what I'm trying to do is to just give you a little bit of an overview on what how the waste scenarios in this region, which is again one of the largest generators of waste. How do we characterize that waste, and what is it that comes into the recyclable category, and where do we face these challenges in terms of collection or sorting, and what are the potential possibilities, and some case studies of what we could do in terms of office recycling and workplace recycling. We go to the next slide. Yeah, so if you see this particular slide, you'll realize that the GCC generates more than, at this point of time, more than 120 million tons of waste, which is quite a huge generation. And interestingly, out of it, around 53% is construction and demolition waste, and about 33% is your normal municipal solid waste, which is what all of us refer to, the type of waste which you and I generate in your homes, and 14% is your industrial and other type of waste. So I would like to focus on this 33% MSW, which is what all of us are talking about in terms of source segregation or sorting and all that. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you look at this 33% of this MSW, you will realize that we are number 2 in the region in terms of generation. We are generating more than 11 million tons per annum of municipal solid waste alone, which is quite a staggering amount. And if you go to the next slide. Yeah, if you look at this particular MSW, that 11 million tons, you will realize that almost about 86 to 87% is generated in the 2 major Emirates of Dubai and Abu Dhabi. The rest, in the other Emirates. And interestingly, if you see the percentage of recyclables which is present in this quantity of MSW, it is almost 45%. And even in that 45%, if you see 48% is around paper, 30% is around glass, 10% is around plastics, and 5% around metals. And only about 55% is your is a food waste or the organic type of waste which constitute this. So you can imagine there's a huge quantity of recyclables which are out there, which is going into the landfills. And the recovery of this can be effective only if you're going to have a source segregation, whether it is at your home or your office or wherever you say, you go to the next slide. Yeah. So now let's look at, having said that, if you're taking Dubai on this region per se, where do we stand in terms of the challenges which we face in different types of waste? So I've just showing a few slides on the type of waste and where do we stand currently. Now, the first one is municipal solid waste, where of course collection and transportation has been a mature sector. That's what you could also see from your survey report, that nobody has got a complaint in terms of transportation of the waste. So that's a very mature sector. A lot of companies like us, we have been in this field for many years, collecting waste from point A and dumping it into the landfill. Now, the second step is in terms of your source segregation and then subsequent sorting, recycling, and all those activities. Now, all your treatment processes which are coming up in this region can be successful only if you're going to have a proper source segregation. And unfortunately, even today, 80% of the recyclables in Dubai is still going to the landfills. It's only about 20% which is going to these processing sectors where you're able to recover the recyclables. So there's a huge work to be done, which is continuously being taken forward. Next slide. Yeah, again, hazardous waste is another element which also, both from the industrial sector and your general waste sector, there's a lot of issues in terms of the proper segregation. Of course, there are treatment facilities available. The only sector where in the hazardous segment, which is quite organized in the region, is your medical waste, because by law, that is a separate collection and transportation and disposal and incineration mechanism which is operating. So that's been quite mature, but the rest of the sector still needs growth, and it's still in the growing stage. Oil and gas, of course, is an industrial area where there are a lot of specific processing and operations which are going on, where we are also playing some key roles in that. The next slide. Then of course, your e-waste. There are some very large facilities which have been established now. Here again, source segregation collection is one of the major challenges to make sure that they're serviced properly. Then you have your C&D waste, which is almost a very large chunk of the total waste in the region. So that is, at this point of time, quite well addressed in some of the Emirates where there is complete control on collection, transportation, and recovery recycling. Next slide. Okay, so, what are the type of roles which government and private sector we need to do? See, there are different models which is coming in place now. They want to have, direct investments, public-private partnerships, build, own, operate, transfer, and direct investments where people try to, directly look at opportunities and set up. So there are a lot of investments which are being planned. My colleague Harbinder also would definitely vouch for it. But everywhere, finally, the success of all these initiatives will finally stand at the source segregation, which is the most critical area. Because without that, all these downstream activities will have its own problems. Next slide. Okay, so what are the challenges in terms of why source segregation is becoming an issue here? One is, of course, the typical demography of this region, where there are more than 150 nationalities, the huge, expat demography, a transient population. So source segregation involves a lot of mindset and a commitment to do that. And companies like us, we can keep educating people, we can keep doing a lot of things, but unfortunately, what happens, you try to educate a region or an area in the city, and you go there the next time, you will find a complete different set of population there. So because there is nobody who's permanently stationed here. So the chances of them imbibing those values and then trying to cultivate that habit keeps getting diluted. So it's a continuous effort on our part to make sure that this education and these sort of things are, getting really pushed across. Otherwise, it becomes a big problem in making sure that you are not able to achieve all these, source segregation or sorting initiatives. Then, of course, it's also a question of the different perception of residents to recycling, depending upon the region from where they're coming from. There are a lot of expats who are used to this back home. A lot of people who do not follow this, who needs much more education. Next slide. Yeah. So basically, as companies, so what we have been trying to do is we need to start right at the basics in terms of encouraging people to look at sorting. That means just start with a two-bin system. That is how the municipality and the authorities here started looking at encouraging people to get into the source segregation, where we started saying, okay, you keep two bins. In one bin, you put all your recyclables, paper, plastic, glass, whatever you can find as recyclable. In the other bin, you put all your general waste, your organic waste, your food waste. And then companies like us could then collect these mixed dry recyclables, as we call it, take it to a sorting station. We then separate it out, sort it out mechanically, and then try to see that this goes into the right recycling stream. So these sort of efforts have been going on, and which has also contributed to a growth of recycling generation from about 0% in some of the areas where we have been handling from 0 to about 20-22%. So this is going to be one of the biggest ways by which we can look at source segregation, taking it forward. And there are a lot of other constraints why people are not following or taking interest in recycling, because there's absolutely no landfill tax, there's no tipping fees. So as long as you know that there's somebody out there who just picks up your waste, whatever you throw out, and I don't have to spend anything, people are lax. The moment they realize that they have to pay, which means the polluter pays concept comes in, they know that they need to pay for every ton of waste or kg of waste they generate. Then they start looking at how do they ensure that they don't generate this waste, instead divert it into other recycling sectors, which will give them money instead, rather than just throwing away the waste. Next slide. So what I thought is I'll just highlight a few case studies, which as a company we have been getting involved with to give an idea of how source segregation has been achieved. See, for example, in the past 5-6 years, in terms of one of the programs which we have been doing with the municipality, we have achieved from about 0% to about 2% being separated out from the residential areas. So what I'm trying to do is, first of all, before we go and start preaching outside, I think we need to practice what we're trying to preach. So as an organization, we have had a lot of in-house initiatives, which has been encouraging our staff to come forward and start collection, recycling, and source segregation and all that. So which has encouraged, which has made sure that our people are also able to go and volunteer for ensuring that these values are inculcated outside. So go to the next slide. Yeah. So one is, of course, our employee awareness programs, which is a regular thing in our own system. So we have ensured that within our office premises, we would have kept specific bins where we keep telling them, see, whatever is the type of recyclable you try to put it. Of course, these type of things may not be feasible in a very nascent market, but because as an organization, we have been involved in this, we've been trying to cultivate specific stream recycling options within the premises. And go to the next slide. where plastic, paper, food and others are being, and then what we're trying to do is, see, while we are trying to encourage whatever is the waste which is being generated in the offices to be sorted out and collected, we are also encouraging every employee to try to start doing the same back home, which means that they are encouraged to sort recyclables at home, bring to the office, and we have kept separate bins and provisions there where these are then sorted and put it there. And we are also giving them points in terms of every week. For example, personally, I carry every Sunday all the recyclables home, bring it to the office. It gets weighed, and we have got a record system where the quantity of recyclables which is brought by each employee is recorded. So it is then based on that, we have been giving them some points, and then yearly some awards are being given. Plus, they can also use these points and get some things out from our in-house stores. You go into the next slide. Yeah, so this is the reward points based on that we get rewards and maybe vouchers, gift vouchers, or so many other recycled items also which we make. For example, glass upcycling is something which we do. These are given as rewards. Next slide. So just to give an example, these type of messaging would help and encourage everybody to push for recycling. For example, in 2019, you can imagine just a small office like ours, we could generate about 27 tons of mixed recyclables and about 230 kgs of e-waste. And then what we have given the feedback to the employees is, look, because of which, what have they contributed? They made sure that about 160 trees have been saved, about 57,000 hours of electricity has been saved, about 48,000 gallons of water, and about 1,500 gallons of oil. So when people start seeing these type of tangible numbers, they realize, and you can imagine just an office with about 100, 150, 200 people can bring in this type of impact. Imagine collectively what we can achieve if all of us focus to drive this in every office. And next slide. Yeah, so this is again in terms of, let us say, what we have done in a society through the My City, My Environment program, which has been there for the past 5-6 years now with the municipality. It was an interesting experiment which has been quite successful. So, all the households were provided 2 bins, a black bin and a green bin, and we've been telling them to put the recyclables in the green bin and food and other waste in the black bin. And then we've been serving more than 7,500 villas, almost about 80,000 residents in the Jumeirah and all those areas. Go into the next slide. And if you see, the objectives was 25% should be diverted by 2018. We already reached those type of targets. And it has been a door-to-door waste collection. And, we have achieved more than 22%. The next slide. Yeah, and then of course, again, education has been the major driving force for this. We need to have a lot of campaigns for this. So we had about a 3x3x3 campaign structure, which means one is 3 objectives were set up. That is a sustainable and clean surrounding, generate and constantly improve the collection of recyclables, build a strong people, public, private partnership model, because everybody needs to contribute to this. Then we had to target all the groups, the residents, establishments, the authorities, because this is one segment where unless everybody participates together, you cannot succeed. And then communication theme, why should you be recycling? How to recycle? And what is my role in the whole chain? So this messaging has to be constantly going to every individual resident so that he becomes a part of this movement. The next slide. Yeah, so it was basically a 360-degree awareness approach, as I was saying, door-to-door mall campaigns, school campaigns, newspaper, resident rewards, word of mouth, social media, and PR. So every mode of communication was used to make sure that this messaging was going in the right way. Next slide. Yeah, so just some pictures of how these campaigns were run, poster campaigns, door-to-door campaigns, schools. And then an interesting thing is, for example, in all these households, what happens is we all talk about recycling, we can speak on seminars and webinars and all that, but finally, the person who does all this is maybe a maid or somebody right at the bottom end of the chain. So we had to educate them. So we used to run a lot of programs for these household maids in these ladies clubs through our teams. So, and we used to reward them too, so that in each house to house, we used to have competition between maids as to who would recycle more. And we have given them a lot of even awards like iPhones or things like that, which will make sure that they're consciously doing this work in their houses. The next slide. Yeah, and then of course, also the stakeholders, the residents of course are the stakeholder, all of us are a stakeholder in the whole thing. Now this is where the right messaging should do. A lot of people think that, oh, all these companies collect this waste and then they again go and dump it in the landfill. We have seen people just, sort, we sort the whole waste, but then somebody just picks it up and throws it away. No, it doesn't go like that. It does genuinely get into a recycling stream. So that messaging has to really reach them. And maybe we have also done programs where we ask them to come and see some of the sorting facilities which we have, which I'll show you in a few slides further down. The next slide. Yeah. So generally the process of collection, sorting, baling. So these are all stuff which gets generated from the waste and how it gets baled, and then it goes into specific treatment process. The next slide. Yeah. So of course, in the process as an organization, just to give you an idea, we are into a lot of processing facilities which have set up. One is of course construction and demolition, slop and sludge, and material recovery facility, which is what is the one which we're talking about now in terms of household waste. The next slide. So, so primarily what I'm trying to convey here is that, well, all the necessary ingredients to make this a very sustainable society does exist in the UAE, because it is a highly potential and growing market. There is a lot of government focus and support. Legislations and controls are slowly being tightened to make sure that now the tipping fees and landfill tax, this is what will finally drive the whole thing. But of course, that has been under finalization. Hopefully, it should get implemented soon. Then public awareness has been going up very high in terms of waste management. Then of course, a clear national government strategy in this place. Legal systems are there in place to protect the investment. So I think there will be a lot of players who are willing to come and contribute into this society for waste management, but we need to support them with a proper source segregation and sorting at source, because that is what will ensure that they get the right raw material to process and achieve the 75% waste diversion target of UAE. Next. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your informative presentation there, Mr. Madhu Mohan. Very interesting to see the scale of the challenge here, and the facts and figures that we can see of the amount of potential recyclables that are being sent direct to landfill. It's a very large number, and the initiatives that DOSCO are taking in their own workforce and to increase those recycling rates with the campaigns is very interesting. And one thing I was quite positive about is you can, with your management system you set up, you can really see the impact of those initiatives as well, which must really help with that engagement and communication back into those stakeholders. You can see the direct sort of savings that are being made through the initiative. So yeah, thank you again. That's very interesting. We'll be moving on to our second speaker for today, and that's Mr. Harbinder Singh from Yes Full Circle. So Mr. Harbinder, if I ask you just to unmute yourself, and then you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Charles. Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me? I saw some feedback earlier about static here. No? Okay. Next slide, please. So today's topic, right, is about waste segregation to recycling the journey. Next one, please. Right. So we talk about garbage, right? Garbage or waste, right? It's basically a misplaced resource, right? If we look at it, there are basically two types. So we break it very broadly. One is commercial and industrial waste, and second is household waste, right? Next slide. Okay, I think we're here to talk specifically about office streams, the waste that comes out of it, right? So if you see all the things that are here, right? We have many components. We have e-waste that comes out of office. We have textile waste. We have metal waste, paper and carton boxes, plastics, organic waste, and glass. So we look at it, these are all common items you find in any office, right? And in some form or other, it can be recovered back for recycling. Right? So for example, in the case of your glass bottles, your glass you pick up goes back to become glass bulbs again, glass bottles. Your organic waste, right, depending on the size of your facility, you can do in-house composting system to actually generate compost material, right? They can be used back for fertilizers, right? Plastics, you can recycle the plastics back, recycle it properly. There's a wonderful company called Degrade over here that takes the plastic bottles and turns it back into t-shirts, okay? Next slide, please. So what is recycling? Okay, I think recycling, as you all know, is a process of converting waste materials into new materials and objects, right? So every time that we recycle, from a tangible perspective, right, we save 24 trees, and we divert 1,600 kgs of CO2. Not to mention, right, they save 6,500 kilowatts of energy. So we see a cycle that happens here, the circular economy cycle, right? You have recycled paper carton boxes. They come out, they become a waste generation, for example, either through your e-commerce packaging. Again, you make sure it goes separated to the bins, right? Now go back to paper recycling plants, and it goes back again into the use of production, right? Next slide, please. All right, so this is basically the circular economy and recycling, right? If you look at the elements of the circular economy, there's production, there's use, and while we had the issue of trying to be able to recycle everything, also important to make sure, right, that the product design is important from the beginning so they can be designed to recycle. So, and then sometimes we as people as consumers, had to be able to dictate through our purchasing choices. Okay? Something may look nice, okay, for example, in terms of packaging, you may buy it, but after that, what do you do with that packaging? Can the packaging truly be recycled? So it's a conscious decision that we make as purchasers, right? That will then help the manufacturers and designers to make material that actually can fit the circular economy. If you see, right, the amount of metals, for example, okay, or materials that we're using, okay, between 2011 to 2060 is massive, right? And it's not sustainable. Ultimately, it's to come from somewhere down the earth, right? And the earth is got a finite pool of resources. Once you use all that up, where do we go, right? Okay. Next slide, please. So this is a typical example recycling process. Many of the people here I see are probably familiar with it, but this is for some of it not be. So again, the concept is pick up the mixed recyclables, you bring it back to the MRF station, like what Mother had showed in his previous slide. There basically go to a sorting process where different components are taken out, right? Either through optical scanners, you have electromagnetics, for example, to move the material out from there. Glass gets broken, separated out through air systems. Then you sort out the materials, and then it goes down, to either domestic or exporter for manufacturers to convert it back into recycled products. Right? Next slide, please. Now, why is segregation important? Okay, it's a primary step in waste recycling or waste to energy process. Right, source segregation is directing different kinds of waste to different streams of processing. We all know, I think one of the issues I saw in the poll earlier on, right, was that segregation is an issue, okay? But let's be a bit honest with ourselves, it is an issue, but it requires a bit of extra effort on our part. Most locations do have a place to recycle. There's no place within the office itself. There's usually a bin or a public recycling bin nearby, right? The question whether I put the extra effort to pick up the material and bring it all the way down and put it into that particular recycling point. Right? If we can start doing that, right, then we are truly on the path to create a circular economy scenario. The good thing about it, because of climate change, because of awareness through social media, through I think genuine change, genuine cultural change, right? That people are now moving away from a truer society, right? So recycling is expected to grow faster than mining and materials, and that's a good sign. It means that to make production materials, we don't have to destroy the earth anymore, right? You can actually get the raw materials from the same materials that we have bought and purchased, and now, right, send them for recycling. Next one. So if you see, right, the basic breakdowns here, breaking down. So if we have, for example, we've broken the slides down the basic components, right? So we have, for example, organic waste and plastics, okay? Again, you go down, you can see, you can turn it into compost. Depending on the size of your office, you actually can have a biogas facility to generate gas and energy. Plastics, like I mentioned early on, can go back to the PET bottles. You can make industrial films, you can make textile fibers, right? There's a lot of applications that are there, right? Actually, it takes 10 bottles to make enough plastic fiber to make a t-shirt, 63 bottles to make a sweater, again, 14 bottles to make insulation, okay, for a ski jacket. So basically, an example of how the bottles can be reused back into a product itself. Next slide, please. So we have, paper and e-waste again. Okay, in paper, you can see most common recycling, you see office paper. Okay, then you do have, which can be reused back again into, either telephone directories, although that's now obsolete in most countries. Okay? Egg cartons for lower grade paper, building installation, construction paper. It can become right on the kitty litter required. Okay, newspapers, paper plates, and there are all kinds of uses that come out of it. Okay. E-waste itself, again, a lot of it can be recovered back, and through that, you have valuable materials that you can look at, like copper, tin, iron, aluminum, fossil, which can be reused back in the production process. So for paper and cardboard, for example, you can turn to UPM as a party there, and I think e-waste you have Eclex, that's there, also with environmental. Next one, please. Then you have metal waste. Again, metal waste recovered from that. Your aluminum, your brass, your bronze, your cast iron, right? All that goes back to become bicycle parts, car parts, steel beams. Okay. Again, with glass, again, you can see you can take it, you can turn it back to abrasive sandblast media, and then bind it into ceramics and bricks. Okay. So again, example there: bottles, jars, new jars, fiberglass. Next one, please. Textile. Okay, you have textile material. I think I'm missing a slide, Charles. A slide for textile recycling. That's fine. Okay, right. So basically, if we look at what we just talked about, right, all of the products that come out, right, can again be found back within the house that we live in, right? Everything has a use from there. Okay, from the e-waste to textile waste to metal can waste to glass waste to plastic waste. So everything has a particular value that can be used back in our day-to-day living habits, right? Next slide. Okay. Now, if we don't continue to segregate, okay, the reality is, right, that today commodity prices are cheap, okay, because the way financial accounting is done. But when you start doing, right, and you put in things like environmental accounting, and the banks have begun moving to put in certain processes, right, to monitor loans, right, you will find, right, the cost of raw materials will start going up, and they will eventually result in us, right, paying more for our products. Okay, so that is one aspect. That's one realistic aspect you can be facing. Right. Number two, right, is that all this mining that we're doing today, okay, all this contamination, all the plastics that is going into the seas, okay, that will enter into a biosystem. Yeah. Plastic is probably the only man-made material, okay, that I can see of all the recycling material, and if you see that today, it's found everywhere, okay, from your big pieces down to your small little microplastics that are going to enter the food chain, right? And last time I checked, guys, I don't think we can eat plastic. Okay, so which means that if we don't do anything about it in the long run, I think we're looking at our own demise over a couple of generations. Okay, so from a self-preservation perspective, it's also good to try and encourage recycling to happen. Okay? Next slide, please. Okay, are you going to the slide before? Charles said that. Now, soil segregation does have a particular importance in terms of driving the value of the recycled commodity, right? Where you try and separate it as much as possible within practical circumstances, you tend to get pretty good material. So we have, for example, a liquid drink, right? And you mix it, a plastic drink bottle, you mix it into a carton, a box full of paper recycling, right? The paper becomes wet, okay? It then has to be dried, okay? And then, right, in certain cases, for example, if it turns out that drink happened to be coffee or or some other soft drink, for example, then it affects that paper material from being actual purpose. It then be used but for secondary, a lower yield purpose. So it's important to always try and where we can, right, to encourage a proper separation of waste. Right? Okay, next slide. So I've completed in 15 minutes. I've managed to catch up for Madhu's time, huh?
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And yes, perfect, bang on time. Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Harvinder. Again, another very interesting presentation there. I think really highlighting the challenge of contamination of recyclables. So I think referring back to the importance of segregation, and it's a case of getting the segregation right as well, is a really important one. And I think it's also quite reassuring to know that the technologies are in place. If we get the segregation right, the technologies are available in the material recycling facilities to separate them out on our behalf. So we get that mixed recycling waste stream in order, and then the technology is available. So again, thank you very much for that. Really appreciate the time, and apologies for the missing slide there. We can maybe include it. We'll be sharing the presentation slides after the webinar as well, so we can share this with all of the attendees afterwards. Yeah. So yes, again, thank you very much, Mr. Harvinder. Very interesting. Okay, so now we're moving on to our final speaker for today's session. That's Mr. Siva Kumar from Nestle. So Mr. Siva Kumar, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Charles. And also thanks to Madhu and Harbinder for an inspiring presentation. I hope all of you are safe and all your families are safe from the current COVID crisis. Take more care. So let me go into my presentation. And I represent Nestle in Middle East and North Africa. As you can see, in the 19 countries, our manufacturing footprint is over 25 factories. And apart from this, we also have a lot of distribution centers and sales offices. Why I purposefully put this is because it's not only to show how big is our business in the region, but it's also how big is the impact that we can create to this environment through our operations. And that is why, can you move to the next slide, Charles? And that is why Nestle has taken a bold commitment about zero net emissions by 2050. So Nestle is accelerating its actions. Why I put about zero net emissions in a presentation on waste? Because as much as we control the waste generation and waste recycling at the country where it is being generated, and Harbinder talked about closed loop circular economy. So as much as we do it within the country where the waste is being generated, the emissions from the process will be less. What is happening currently in the region? Majority of the waste is being segregated, and most of the percentage is being shipped to other countries, which also have an impact on emission. So that is why Nestle is focusing on producing locally our product, collecting locally the waste, and also recycling and giving it another life within the country of operation. So that is why I put this slide here, and we'll move to the next slide now. Charles, can you move? Yeah. So what we have done in this MENA region is we have a sustainability plan, and we focused on how a different life can be given to the waste that is being generated in our premises, which is quite easy. But we are now focusing out of our premises also how we can work with our retailers, and also how we can increase awareness for the consumers. So in the countries where we operate here, we have now worked with organic waste to be a compost for mushrooms. We are trying to work organic waste into manures for the farms where in the operating countries we have, and also we are increasing the local collection and giving another life, which I will show as examples in the next upcoming slides. Can we move to the next slide, Charles? So what we did is we have total performance management that is being used as a process, in which first thing is a risk assessment of our premises. It is not the risk assessment for the safety and health of the people, but it is a risk assessment for our waste that is being produced, which is the environmental impact assessment. And we do data collection. So this data collection is a first very important step to know how much waste is being generated. If we don't know our numbers, we cannot work. Without numbers, we cannot achieve any target. So moving to the data collection to the segregation at source. Can you do a click, Charles? We segregated our waste on waste disposal and also on spillage, and hazardous and non-hazardous waste. Then we see how much waste is going out of our facility. So because we have to first clean what is inside our facilities, so that is why we focused on this. As I mentioned, that we are slowly moving out of our perimeters to create an impact, a positive impact, working with lot of local partners and stakeholders, and so that we can give a collective result for this environment. Can we move to the next slide, Charles? So what we have done, we have made tailor-made communication bins, so that people will have proper segregation behaviors. And can you make one more click? Also coming about the organic waste that is coming from the canteen food, because food waste is another issue that we are facing nowadays. We produce more than what we need, and we are not segregating it on the right way, and we are not consuming it on the right way. So we educate our people on how much was the waste of the previous day, so that how many people can be fed with that, and this creates an emotional balance. So once this culture is inbuilt within the organization, then we can also make them to practice it outside also. Next slide, Charles. Some of the examples that we have been doing slowly in the region. Why I'm mentioning slowly? Because it is a change mindset. It is a cultural mindset. The governments are providing facilities for segregation, but you have to make an effort to go and reach these segregation points, because we have a lot of high-rise towers with one garbage chute, and you have to really segregate from your home. And as Madhu mentioned, municipal solid waste is the biggest contributor among the other types of waste. So we have worked on Nespresso capsules that is being collected back, and for secondary packaging, which is paper based, we work with Union Paper Mill, and Harbinder, he mentioned about UPM. And for the organic waste, we work with Tadwir, where it is converted into compost. And for our plastic waste, plastic, I will mainly focus on PE, which is being converted back into transport racks for our water gallons. We were not having that much PET local production in the country. What I'm talking is about in Dubai. But now we have our own PET retail bottles being produced in Abu Dhabi. So our next focus, our priority is on PET. There is a lot of companies available in the market, but there are very few who really give a good life for the PET, a second life. Like how Harbinder was mentioning about the bottles can be converted into T-shirt, bags, caps, textile. So this is a way how we can really bring in a closed loop circular economy. So PET is the next focus for us, and slowly Nestle is focusing um, all kinds of packaging material that we are sending it to the consumers, which means like we are pumping plastic packaging outside. So we are trying to recover the plastic as much as we put out through secure our product, so that it will come to your kitchen cupboard or to your table safely. And how now we are working on solutions how we can take it back and bring it to another stream of life. Next slide, please, Charles. So we make sure that because there is a kind of compliance issue also when it comes to waste segregation, because waste is alternate gold, I can tell. A lot of people are not seeing the value in waste, but some people, they overvalue it. They want to make more money out of the waste. So you cannot go to the extreme of making too much money, and you cannot go to the extreme of not considering this. So waste, if it is segregated properly, and if it will be collective approach between the waste generator monitor and waste collector and waste recycler, it will be a win-win situation for all of us. Next slide, please, Charles. We do have some selected criterias for partners with whom we are focusing on working with. First thing is the legal compliance. The authorities should be classifying this company to collect this certain kind of waste, because there is a lot of black market that is happening. I can tell this openly. There is a lot of local traders who come, they collect all types of waste from you, and then they you don't know where it ends up. So there is as I told, it's an alternative gold. So we go for legal recommendations, and we see this company is having a safe and sustainable operation, preferably local recycling. But if no other choice, then we will go for the next step of sustainable recycling beyond the country where it is being produced. And we also look for shared purpose and values. As I mentioned, like some of them are seeing only financial gain out of waste, and when compared to the environmental gain, so we try to balance it. Of course, recyclers and the MERS in the region, they also pump in their money, they come in to make money out of it. So we want to see a win-win situation here, and also most preferably a one-stop shop. So instead of having 10 different types of collectors and recyclers for different types of waste, if we can see a solution that one point contact who arranges us all the different kinds of collection, and also raising awareness for the people, and also recycling locally. So this will be our other criteria. Also, we look at the reputation of the company with whom we want to work. We check with the government and also from key stakeholders. And can we move to the next slide? And we also look for responsible sourcing, because we try to see everything as a whole package. So it's not only about waste segregation, we also want to see how the workers in that company are being treated in terms of safety and health, and what is the kind of facilities being provided to them, so that it is related to human related care also. And we want to work with companies who accept to monitor the recycling process, because when our brand is being recycled there, our packaging material contains our brand. So we have a requirement that if you want to recycle our product for 2 or 3 weeks also, we want our people to be accommodated there with the time of recycling, and security of our brand name, because this is another lobbying that is happening in the market. You can find a duplicate product with same brand name of a similar company, and different quality of product. So this is how we want to work. And we also want to see the competitiveness about the price, and the resources they have, and the service, the flexibility in the service, I can tell like this. And the last point is the guarantee. I mean, like with a good financial record, and we want to work with a long-term contract, because there are a lot of companies, a lot of startups and entrepreneurs who want to enter the field, because they see there is a big future in this alternative gold, but they could not withstand. I have witnessed in the last decade of me in UAE, there are several companies that came up, but several initiatives came up, but then we don't know where it went up. So we want to work with the companies who have good record locally, and also if it would be better if it is internationally good record. So that's a little bit I wanted to share with you all. It is a big topic. It's very difficult to present to you in 15 minutes, but we have to talk weeks about this topic, because it is for the future of our next generations. I hope I delivered the message, and I see that some questions popping up also.
Fantastic. Thank you again very much, Mr. Sivakumar. A very, very interesting presentation there. And I think what's really, really interesting seeing there is when you have that strategic element where you introduce waste management as an emissions impact, not just impact on the environment. When you embed it within the long-term environmental strategy for the business, it leads also into the way that you can manage and select your waste service provider partners. So having that long-term view and making sure you want to work with reputable providers help you achieve your strategy seems like a nice link back into the sort of the core objectives of that strategy in the first place as well. So thank you very much. It's very, very interesting. And that concludes our speaker sessions for today. And like Mr. Sivakumar mentioned there, we do have some questions that have come in. We're now in the Q&A session. We have quite some time. The program for today's event was until 12:30. Maybe we don't need to spend 30 minutes on questions and answers here, but if anyone has any questions, please do submit them into the Q&A section. There's a Q&A button. You can submit those. Don't forget to list who you want to direct your question to and what that question is. Okay then, so we have a question here for Sivakumar, and that is, how do you manage food waste, ensuring that you minimize food waste in your supply chain process?
So food waste in our premises, we have a waste digester machine that was procured through one of the suppliers here in Dubai. They have presented their machine and the quality, how it works in Dubai Chamber previous presentations. So the machine is working good, and the end product, we use it for compost in the plants and trees that we have in our facility. And the food waste, I mean, the product waste that comes out, I mean, like near expiry or expired. So we try to work with Dubai municipality. If before expiry it can be given to food bank on charity, we give it for charity. Or if it is expired or because of any reasons it has to be destructed. So we work with the local compost manufacturers here to convert it into. We separate the packaging and then we give the food only to them, and they convert it into compost.
That's great. Thank you very much. We also have a question here. I think it's for Dolsko, but the question is, recycling rates of plastic has dropped while production has increased dramatically. Why are waste management companies not recycling plastic as much as they were? So Mr. Madhu Mohan, do you have a response for this one?
Can you unmute me? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I hope I have understood the question correctly, which means recycling rates of plastic has dropped while production has increased dramatically. Production of what? Production of plastic or recycled products or recycled plastic material?
So it's recycling rates of plastic has dropped while production has increased dramatically. Why are waste management companies not recycling plastic?
So the basic thing is, if you're looking at you know, for example, if you're looking at availability of recycled plastics for getting into this recycling chain in this market, it boils down again back into the entire source segregation you know, response which we have been discussing. Because see, in terms of collecting of plastics, if you're looking at PET or HDP or LDP or anything like that, you can imagine even when we have such a large operations, the source segregated material which we are getting is very, very minuscule in terms of volumes, maybe not more than 20-30 tons minimum, whereas the volumes which are produced are quite large. So then what happens is that there is other type of recycled plastic material which are recovered, which are primarily from the mixed waste, which means that it's putrefied and dirty plastics, which needs to be washed, cleaned. Now the problem is, once you take these type of material and I try to reprocess it and then try to get a value, because at the end of the day, all these operations involve cost and there has to be a realization of the investment to get these things processed. Now, unfortunately, today with the low petroleum prices, the difference between recycled plastic and virgin plastic is less than $50 a ton. So what happens is that, you know, it becomes a big challenge for recyclers to really take this material and take it for processing. So one is, of course, the improper source segregation, which is a deterrent or constraint. Second thing is the price difference now between recycled and virgin.
Well, that's great. It's a really good response. Thank you very much. We actually have a follow-up question to that one as well, which is where can we find a list of plastic waste that is recycled locally? Do we have that as well?
Yeah, we can give you. I mean, basically, there are a couple of companies, of course, Degrade and all that. They're collecting and they get it outside. But there are a few companies which are producing, recycled processing. But of course, majority gets, maybe even exported to other places where they're processing.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got another question here for Siva Kumar. And this is, thank you for informing us on the waste segregation in your factory. Is Nestle also engaging into waste segregation for their fast-moving consumer goods products, which are sold to the consumer via the supermarkets? Are there any direct consumer-targeted programs in the supermarkets?
Yes, I think already I mentioned about it in my presentation. Like, we concentrated first inside the organization. Now we are focusing on outside. We are now working on a program about retailer awareness program and customer awareness program, from where we will also go next to the consumers. We have explored several opportunities before about putting reverse vending machines, and things did not move successfully, but now we are again working with local waste segregators, and we are trying to implement reverse vending machines in the customer premises, and we will collect this point. When we have implemented a good solution in, not in Dubai already, we have started in Lebanon, we have started in KSA. Also, we are now focusing, our next priority is Dubai and also on Kuwait, where we really are focusing on the FMCG packaging material, not basically on products, because the issue now is the packaging material. Even though the percentage is very less compared to the general municipal solid waste, we are focusing on taking back the packaging that is being brought into the market by company like us. We are not only focusing on Nestle packaging material, so any kind of, like, let's say bottles, so any water bottle can be put into reverse vending machines. There are a lot of initiatives and successful companies running. As Madhu mentioned, Degrade is one of the successful company who are doing a great job on this. We started working with them also, but at that time we were not producing PET locally. But now, as I mentioned, PET is one of the focus. Maybe we'll establish again contact with successful companies like Degrade, who are trying to give another life, like a T-shirt or cap and all these things locally. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. And there's another question. I think it's just for a clarification. Your composting process, is that aerobic or anaerobic digestion?
For the composting process that is happening within our the digestion machine is anaerobic process digestion, but the one happening outside, I have to check with the Tadvir what is the process they are using, but I use their product for the plants at my home and also in the offices.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We've also got another question. I'm going to direct this one to Mr. Hobinder. I think it's a bit of a philosophical debate, this one, maybe, so hopefully not too long an answer. But the question is burning plastics and fabrics as fuel for blasting an eco-friendly practice? Mr. Hobinder, would you like to address this one?
Ultimately, the question is, how do you find the use of the material, okay? And if we don't recover it out, it goes to landfill, right? So the only other option, right, is to turn it to a waste to energy source, right? So is it an ideal scenario? The answer is no, but on a practical basis, no other options rather than landfill, then it's a pretty good source of material. Plastics and fabrics, right, do have a high calorific value. There are a lot of cement kilns available within the GCC. I think when VR's incineration plant operating, they have one incineration plant there. They'll be a game changer for the region. That's there. The best way, you want to feel passionate, the best way around is to try and separate and to source out and to divert for recycling if possible. I think the challenge will be, right, two things as Madhu has pointed out earlier on, right? One is, and even with Chris's passionate message I see coming out, right? PET has got a value that's attached to it, right? So, you know, you can recover, you can send it back to companies that degrade or other parties that are there. The problem is the other material where there's no such tangible value, right? So in that situation, right, what do you do? Especially market prices being down, right? So any other option is either landfill or you turn it into alternative fuel, you know? So to answer in a very direct manner, okay, it's the best option you have available now. Not ideal, but the best option available now.
Thank you. Appreciate that response. That's not an easy question. I do appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so we've got just another fresh question that's come into the Q&A. This question is, I'd be grateful if anyone could help getting reference of authorized suppliers across GCC for recycling solid fiberglass waste. Thank you. So, yes, I'm not sure, Mr. Madhu Mohan, I don't know if you're familiar with any suppliers in this field, or indeed Mr. Harbinder, in terms of the recycling of the fiberglass.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody who's recycling fiberglass here, but if I am able to get the specifications of the type of fiberglass which is referring to, maybe I can check out and then get back if there is any other option available. Yeah. But I don't think there's anything locally now.
Thank you.
Okay, so as a group, right? Okay, so in Dubai, I think relatively new to everybody, right? Actually, we are operating in 6 countries under, we have 5 different companies within our group, right? We are exploring fiberglass. I think the question here is the volume is available. If you could drop me a note on the volume that's available, we can probably find a solution there for you. It's not within the GCC region, within either our Southeast Asian, South Asian, or Australian hubs itself. Right?
Okay, thank you very much. We have a general question, so I'll open this up to the panel, and it is, how do offices and households recycle food waste, as machines are very costly purchases / investments? So what low-cost options and solutions would the panel recommend here?
That's a really good question, Madam.
Yep.
Yeah. You want to start first? Sorry, I think we'll start first.
Yeah, of course, that is the biggest challenge. So the only way this can grow is once your tipping fees come in. Because then what happens is people will realize that buying a small machine and doing it is better than giving it to transporters or companies like us to take it to municipality, because there'll be a huge tipping fee. That's the only way recycling can grow, because definitely there is a cost for the machine. There is an energy cost, but then it's a question of what is the other choice. The other choice is for you to throw it away, or, you know, this sort of food waste, especially if the entire food waste is separated out and if there is a collection process to take it to a centralized composting facility, it can work. But I don't think those type of systems exist. It all goes into a general waste and then it goes into the landfill. That's a problem.
Okay, so I did a quick Google search just now, right? You know, and call it office composting machines, right? And the prices range from 80 dirhams to 3,000 dirhams. Okay, I think a couple of things come into play, right? One depends on the size of the organic waste that you come out of it. Whether you have a garden nearby that's available. There are different options that are available to try and find a solution. So maybe if you could just drop us a note with what you're looking at the volume, we can find something that's cost effective. I think there are always options available, you know, and I don't think it has to be, sometimes don't need to have a Rolls Royce car when a Toyota can do, basically, okay? To serve the same particular purpose, right? So drop me an email or information what you're looking for specifically, and we'll find you a cost-effective solution, you know, to solve this compost issue.
Great, thank you very much. I think there's no doubt that composting is the sort of very cost-effective method for this. And then I think, like you rightly say, the challenge of what the setup for the office environment is. Are you in a relatively small, completely serviced office environment, and you don't have control of the footprint around the office, where you have green space that you can utilize, and there's a hygiene factor as well with food-based waste bins on site. So I think selecting that partner for helping you manage your food waste sounds like a good approach for this one. So thank you very much. Mr. Sivakumar, do you have any insights on Nestle's?
Yes. For the household, I can recommend there are a few options that is available. Bokashi was one of the famous one, affordable price, and also it's a natural digestion. The only problem is it is very easy to be in a villa community rather than in a high-rise apartment, because it attracts flies and it also emits smell. So it's very difficult to do in an apartment or a high-rise building. If you have a dedicated, lot of high-rise buildings are now coming with dedicated waste segregation areas. At the same time, if you go just now on Amazon.ae, you can find lot of composting solutions that is available right away, and this is good in an affordable price, that you can have it only for the waste that is organic waste that is coming out of your house.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we do have also some questions coming in on the chat window as well. So I'm just going to revert to the chat window and ask some questions from there. So we have a question here for, I believe this one might be a good one for Mr. Madhu Mohan. And the question is, who are the authorized recycling bodies in the region? We are looking for much more informative practices, waste management tools, rather than seeing PR of different brands. So I think it's actually quite similar to a question we had earlier on, but yes, Mr. Madhu Mohan, essentially a list of authorized recycling bodies.
Yeah, of course, now when you're talking about authorized recycling facilities, first of all, to set up any recycling facility here, you need to get a license. So that means that you need to, it is already an authorized facility once you have a license to operate and run a recycling facility. Now, when you're talking about recycling bodies, now the question is, there can be a lot of, agencies which are also doing collection for recycling. Now, they will not be per se doing the recycling themselves, but they would be running campaigns and collecting recyclables, and then companies like us may be taking it further, either for to the recyclers, existing recyclers in the region, or to give it to outsiders. So the question is, if you're looking at agencies which are encouraging recycling, or we can share some of the names of people like that, including all the waste management companies are recycling agencies too, because we all encourage people to. Then you have also got a lot of NGOs or those sort of agencies, like for example the Emirates Environmental Group and so many agencies like that, who keep telling people to go ahead and do recycling. So so that's the way the whole thing is done. And then of course our role as a waste management company comes in two ways. One is of course collection, transportation, then of course processing too, which is a final stage. Now, if you are not able to process it, we pass it on to companies, because at the end of the day, the cycle gets completed if you can prove from cradle to grave sort of a traceability of the waste. That means it goes finally to a product and to a system where it gets recycled back. So those sort of documentation and all that we do provide as required.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. We have another question here on the chat window, and it's saying that a lot of focus from companies with recycling is on CSR initiatives, and the focus isn't necessarily so much on recycling the waste material that is being put into the environment through their products. So I think this is a nice link to Nestle. So Mr. Sivakumar, can you address this question on the recycling of the waste material that's generated through the production of your products?
Yes. So this is a very generic question, and it has been asked to companies like Nestle all over everywhere. I would tell that it's not our own CSR, because this CSR is being prepared based on the challenges that is being faced by the public and in the environment. So each company who are creating their CSR is based on the problem that is being even created by the people, by consumers, by us, and everyone. So I would not see CSR and the environmental initiatives separate. It's same. And as I already mentioned during our my presentation, that we are already focusing on all the waste, and I will not tell waste, all the packaging material that is going out through our product, because there is a reason why this packaging material is there. It is to keep the product, when it comes to you, to be safe, to be hygienic, to be secure. So that is the reason why that packaging material itself is there. What we are working on as Nestle, that by 2025, 100% of our packaging material that is around our product will be recyclable or reusable. Now, when it comes to the definition of recyclable, it varies. The EU mentions that each of the country population should have minimum 50% of the population access to recycling infrastructure. Do we have it in any of the MENA countries? I am asking. So no, we don't have. So we cannot claim recyclable based on EU. But if I go by the local legal law, there is nothing stopping us from claiming my product is 100% recyclable. So we bring the packaging material. We expect a collaborative approach when we make our packaging material 100% recyclable or reusable. We also expect a contribution from the customers, from the consumers, because they go purchase the product from the shelf in a place. And if we provide a disposal or recollection of the packaging material in the same customer premises, the consumer also should take a responsibility to go and put it back there, and there will be some rewarding points coming in future like this. This is coming to what we are working on, the packaging material that is saving our product until it reaches you, until you enjoy. And coming to the packaging itself, it's not only the food packaging. It's plastic, it's everywhere plastic. It is the biggest invention of mankind, but this biggest invention of mankind has lost its purpose, and now it has moved to a way that it has become our own problem, and people are forgetting that we are part of that problem. Can we have a mobile phone without any plastic component, plastic charger, car, all the accessories? Look around you in your room where you are sitting. How much of it is a plastic, and how much of that is having a recycled content? How much is virgin? How much is recycled? Are we disposing it rightly? So it starts with us. So it is a circular loop that everybody has to work together instead of blaming each other. So this would be my answer for that question.
That's great. Thank you very much for that one. We have one final question in on the Q&A panel. I think this would be our final question for the panelists. So thank you everyone that's already submitted your questions. This question I'm going to direct towards Mr. Harbinder, and the question is, what is the best practice for recycling lithium polymer and ion batteries?
What? Okay, so there isn't a specific, I would say, particular best practice now in terms, okay, of actually converting the polymers, ion batteries back into the resources. We have tied up with a company. They have put about $100+ million to come up with a recycling solution. It's still early days yet. So honestly, I can't really give you a clear answer on the downstream process. Okay, there are still very rudimentary ways of doing this now. Probably in about 3 to 4 months from now, if we completed that, we can probably give you a very clear answer. Now, a little bit too, there are practices that are there, but I'm a little bit cautious, to give a specific recycling methodology, right, when there are some new ones coming up at the moment now. Madhu?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge has been, see, lithium ion. It's currently what is happening is, especially with all these Tesla cars and all these being more proliferated, there has been a lot of focus now for lithium-ion recycling, and there are some companies in Europe now who have already started. Especially there's a Belgium company based in Belgium who's already doing it for Tesla. So we've been in discussion with some of these people. The only thing is that, okay, at this point of time, even if you do something like that, it could be only collection and sending it across there for processing. But there are technologies which are coming up right now for recycling lithium-ion batteries, because that's a huge, it's going to be the biggest challenge in the waste management sector soon.
Yeah, I think, okay, if you're talking about the collection perspective, yes, it can be collected as long as you comply and you're going to export that to a third party, as long as you are complying with the Basel Convention and you have the NOCs for the ministries in your country, as well as the receiving country like we have right now, then it's fine, right? But as Madhu pointed out, right, this technology is still in flux now, right? No? So I'm very scared to commit something the best practice later on after a few months, tell you I made a mistake, you know? So that's why I'm a bit cautious about giving that.
Understandable, thank you. So watch this space and we'll see how everything develops. Okay then, thank you very much for your time. We've kept really well to time actually. We're just a couple minutes before 12:30. So that concludes the end of our session today. We'd like to thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to the Supply Chain Task Force members for attending. Thank you to the Waste Management Task Force as well for attending. And of course, thank you very much to our speakers today for giving us your time and giving us some very, very interesting insights and some interesting debate as well in a Q&A session. So we will be sharing the presentations after the conclusion of the webinar. We'll be sending that around to all of the task force members. So with that, we would like to thank you one final time. I'll be stopping the webinar now, and we wish you the best for the rest of your day. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.